To understand the Russian Revolution, we first have to know what the people were revolting about. The last Tsar of Russia was Tsar Nicholas II, a Romanov with ties to Peter the Great. Although Nicholas industrialized Russia with projects such as the Trans-Siberian Railroad, he fell out of favor with the people. First, he was the Tsar when gigantic Russia lost the Russo-Japanese War to the much smaller island of Japan. Second, in 1905 there was an event called Bloody Sunday. The event was linked to worker dissatisfaction in the quickly industrializing country. Thousands protested for better working conditions in St. Petersburg, but the Tsar's imperial guard opened fire on these unarmed people. Many were killed. The backlash led to the creation of a Russian parliament called a Duma, but it did not wield much power, and the Tsar continued to rule with a tight grip. Third, Russia suffered the most casualties of World War I at nearly 2 million soldiers killed. Because they were ill-equipped for battle and lacked military supplies, Nicholas had to go to the front lines himself in an attempt to boost morale. While Nicholas was gone, Tsarina Alexandra had family issues to deal with. Her son Alexei was suffering from hemophilia, a blood disease. She called upon a mystical man named Grigory Rasputin to help her. When Rasputin apparently cured the boy, he was rewarded with some political power. Rasputin's hand in the government led to much corruption, and he was ultimately murdered by aristocrats and thrown into the Neva River in 1916. The Russian Revolution happened in two stages. First, the Tsar was taken out of power in March of 1917. The workers rose up, and a provisional government was put in place of the Tsar under the direction of Alexander Kerensky. When the provisional government pressed on fighting World War I, it angered socialist groups of workers called Soviets. The second stage of the revolution, and longest lasting, was led by Vladimir Lenin in November of 1917. Lenin was a socialist who turned to the writings of Karl Marx. He led a group of revolutionaries called Bolsheviks, hence why the event is called the Bolshevik Revolution. Preaching that the Bolsheviks would bring peace, land, and bread to the Russian people, the provisional government was overthrown and the Bolshevik Party took power. To make sure that the Tsar never came back to the throne, Nicholas II's entire family was executed in 1918. In addition, the capital was moved from St. Petersburg to Moscow. To deliver on their promise of peace, the Bolsheviks dropped out of World War I with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. They gave up some western land in the treaty. To deliver land and bread, Lenin began to divide up all farms and factories amongst the people. This upset the wealthy Russians known as kulaks. What followed was the Russian Civil War from 1918 to 1921. The Bolshevik Red Army, led by Leon Trotsky, took on the anti-Bolshevik White Army. Between the fighting, famine, and disease, more Russians were killed in this war than in World War I. Estimates range from 10 to 15 million. The Red Army won the war, and the Bolsheviks continued to rule Russia. After the war, Lenin set up NEP, or the New Economic Policy. It permitted some capitalism, but the government remained in control of production in the factory system. The Bolshevik Party changed its name to the Communist Party. Communism was a system discussed by Karl Marx where a government provides for a classless society and the workers share the means of production. Communism became a dictatorship under Lenin, and it grew stronger in later years under Joseph Stalin. In 1922, Russia and surrounding lands such as Ukraine and Belarus became the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the Soviet Union. This enormous area extended into northern Asia. There was a movement called Russification that attempted to expand Russian culture and language to areas far away from Moscow. The communism established by Lenin and the Bolsheviks would last in the Soviet Union until 1991. For more
All right. So hope you enjoyed that video on the Russian Revolution, lesson 4.6. And I want to apologize for yesterday. Didn't know that the video was on private, so I'm very sorry about that. But just keep in mind a few things. Um, these videos are great, but they're no replacement for the reading. So make sure you're keeping up to date on your readings too. Remember that Friday is the end of the quarter, so make sure you're making up all of your past due assignments and that you're keeping up with your readings as well. I miss you all. I can't wait to see you again next Monday. I'm out doing my testing. I'm actually with eighth graders, so it's not as bad as I thought. I thought it might have been third or fourth graders, but luckily it's I have a group of good eighth grade kids. So what I'm going to do right now is going to go over the checkpoint here. So You can go ahead and click on the 4.6, the Russian Revolution lesson, and then there's an activity called Revolutionaries and Tyrants. Go ahead and click on that. I feel like that video did a very good job of kind of accurately describing the events of the Russian Revolution, but I want to make sure you know in detail everything that occurred. So I'll run through it here. This was an activity where you chose words from the word bank over here, and you plug them into the blanks, and it gives you the whole history of the revolution. I'll read through it, and then at the end, we'll get our code word together. All right. 1750 to 1848. Industrialization emphasizes the gap between wealthy Russians and poor workers, who make up 80% of the Russian population. European thinkers propose socialism, an economic system in which the government controls property and distributes wealth. 1848. Karl Marx, who we learned about before, and Frederick Engels published the Communist Manifesto, which introduces a form of government in which wealth is distributed to all. 1898, a Marxist revolutionary group led by Lenin called the Social Democrats arises. This group divides into radical Bolsheviks and the more moderate Mensheviks. 1905, high unemployment spurs revolts in St. Petersburg. The Tsar's troops fire on the crowd, and the massacre becomes known as Bloody Sunday. Workers begin setting up revolutionary councils called Soviets. 1914 to 1917, severe shortages of fuel and food brought on by the Great War bring Russia to the verge of collapse. Crowds of women textile workers pour into the streets of Petrograd. Tsar Nicholas II orders troops to subdue them, but the troops join the mobs. 1917, the Tsar, who again is kind of like the Russian king, they call him the Tsar. Tsar Nicholas gives up the throne, and the Bolshevik Party, led by Lenin and Trotsky, assumes command of Russia. 1918, Lenin moves the capital to Moscow. He signs a treaty with Germany and surrenders large portions of Russia. Lenin also assembles a police force to arrest and execute those who do not follow his orders. They also murder the Tsar and his family. They wanted to make sure that no more Tsars would ever rule Russia. 1918 to 1920, Russia falls into a period of chaos and civil war, which breaks out between the Reds, the Bolsheviks, and the Whites, who were supporters of the Tsar. The Reds win, and Lenin reorganizes the old empire into a group of republics known as the USSR. 1924, Lenin dies. Stalin takes charge and decrees the first 5-year plan to increase industrial production. He orders Russians into factory jobs and collective farms. He was trying to get Russia to catch up with the rest of the world. It was called a 5-year plan. He wanted Russia to catch up with the rest of Europe in terms of production. Okay, 1937, 1938, Joseph Stalin's a little bit crazy. He orders a great purge of the government and transforms Russia into a totalitarian state with himself as the head of the government. A little bit power crazy and very distrustful and paranoid of everyone in the government, so he killed a lot of those government workers. All right, so your word for the 4.6 checkpoint is communism. So again, make sure you keep up to date with your readings because this is just a small kind of sneak peek of the lesson. Make sure you read it fully, especially when you don't get the full live session. Okay, stay tuned for your lesson tomorrow. If you didn't watch the lesson yesterday, make sure you go back and do that. That was 4.4, War's End. And I also help you out with the quiz on the end of that one, too. So make sure you go ahead and watch that. It's only about 10 to 13 minutes long as well. Okay, good luck with your lesson, and I'll have a new one up tomorrow, which you can also go through, and I'll help you out on the checkpoint for 4.7 tomorrow as well. Take care.